welcome back to the Live Your Great Story podcast YouTube channel. I'm Stacy, your host, and man, I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you so much for stopping by. You know, this channel exists to introduce you to really cool people doing really cool things. And today, on this episode, I get to introduce you to my friends Bob and Kay VanFleteren. They are the founders of the Trezo school in Haiti. And in our conversation, we just talk about the journey that the Lord took them on in starting the school and the impact that the school's having in the community down in Haiti. So it's a really powerful story. It's super fun. I hope you are encouraged and empowered to dream big dreams and say yes to big adventure. So if you haven't yet, do me a favor, click that subscribe button and be notified when new episodes come out, new content coming out. It would help me out a ton, but like I said, it's going to help you be notified when we have new conversations and new content. So enjoy this conversation with Bob and Kay. So, hey guys, thanks so much for joining me today on the Live Your Great Story podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So let's just start off and tell me a little bit about yourself. So I know we teach together. I know that you're a nurse, but just give us kind of a background about who Bob and Kay are, family, all of that stuff.
Sure. Thanks, Stacy. We're Bob and Kay VanFleteren. We've been married now over 38 years and met way back when in college. And since that time have been led on a bunch of different things. But along the way, we've had 3 sons who are all adult grown men now and 3 grandchildren. We're settled here in Franklin, Tennessee.
Awesome. That's awesome. I was talking with some of our students and they knew that I was going to be interviewing with you guys. And so I asked them, I said, what are some questions you might want to ask Mr. VanFleteren? And one of them goes, how did you get into teaching? Because you have a very eclectic background, they said. And this is your first year, like, officially teaching, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's my first year in the classroom.
Okay.
So for years, we've taught Sunday school, or I've led youth on trips, mission trips. I've always been kind of closely connected to students. People have recognized that I enjoy teaching, but I've never really been in the classroom. So after a long time in industry, in a variety of industries at that, the time came and the situation was right and the opportunity all fit. And this is a new season for me then to jump out of industry and into the classroom. And up until now, I've had a ball doing it.
Awesome. So what are some of those industry things that you've done in the past?
I came out of college with a degree in engineering and started with Dow Chemical in the chemistry industry. Kind of quickly moved from there into automotive, where I spent a good chunk of time. From there into packaged food goods, from there into publishing, and most recently I was in equipment business for the diesel fueling industry.
Wow, that's awesome. I definitely am not a teacher by trade either. So I get that, how you just kind of go on these different journeys through life and then end up here with these kids. So
well, it's kind of fun if you're listening closely, in our case, to what the Lord is doing in your life, and you say, okay, one yes leads to the next yes, and nothing in either of our backgrounds would have prepared either of us for education at all, or any kind of public figure at all. Neither of us were wired in that way when we met, but as we learned, one yes sort of leads to the next, and at some point in your life you begin looking backwards across where you've been led and what you've been privileged to do, and it becomes quite an adventure.
That's awesome. I like how you say that one yes leads to the next yes, because that's kind of part of what my mission is here, right? It's like dreaming big dreams, but then saying yes to big adventures. And so, I mean, let's just jump right into it, because you guys, have had a great career life, I guess you could say, in the marketplace. But ministry-wise, you guys are doing something pretty cool down in Haiti, right? So talk to me a little bit, just first about, like, It's Trezo, right? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's right.
Trezo.
It's Trezo, pronounced Trezo. That's actually a Haitian Creole word that translated means treasures.
Treasures. Okay. And that's a school down in Haiti. So give me a little bit of the backstory. How did the dream for this school get started? What? Just kind of tell me that story.
Let me give you the start of the backstory and then I'll let Kay jump in. But part of the backstory is the one yes leads to another. Prior to Haiti, we had been involved more recently in refugee resettlement here. Kay is a wonderfully hospitable host, and that was her gift. And we thought, well, she'll never get on an airplane, go overseas, but she will welcome the world to our doorstep. And so we'd had several different episodes where we had housed refugees, before that international students, before that crisis pregnancies. And that series of yeses brought us to a place where Kay was actually in nursing school as an adult doing second career, midlife, halftime, change of career thing, where she met another student, and the two of them made Kay's at least first trip to Haiti.
So we made the trip, Stacy. It was there was a major earthquake in Haiti in January 2010, and a good friend of mine in nursing school had two adopted sons from Haiti. So when the earthquake happened, we were all watching it on the news and all the aftermath, and she's like, I've got to go to Haiti. I've got to get down there. I've got to do something. And I said, they're not going to let you in as a nursing student. We didn't really have any value at the time. So I said, let's wait till summer when we're out of school and I'll go down with you. So we went. She had been to Haiti several times adopting her kids, so she was very familiar with it. But we set up so that we were going to go in to serve at, it was called Three Angels, I believe it was called. And it was an orphanage, a school, and a clinic that was outside of Port-au-Prince, the main city in Haiti. So we got on the plane, and as we were getting ready to fly down there, we found out that the person who was supposed to be leading our group couldn't make it. So we kind of landed in Haiti, which at the time was pretty undeveloped at the time. We landed in a hangar and went out and found our way to a guest house where we were going to be staying. And I wasn't in the country but 20 minutes, and riding in the back of a car where so many different smells and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know, something at the time just clicked that I felt like I was home. There was something there about the country. I don't know what it was, but it was just immediate, a situation of falling in love with the country. We worked a medical clinic that week, and the people would line up at like 3 a.m. And the thing was, the doctor who was at the clinic had to be rushed back to the United States for a surgery. So here we were, one nurse, two nursing students, and the Haitian staff, and we were seeing these patients. And it was really challenging because we weren't sure we were doing the right thing. It was like we just were giving our best, and the Haitian staff was really good at walking us through and helping us through that. But what I realized throughout the week, something that became very clear to me, was even though I was studying to be a nurse, it was like medicine in Haiti at the rate that I could provide would be like putting Band-Aids on much bigger problems. And even at that point, I realized that there was something far more fundamental that was needed, and that was education. So that was our first experience. We came back. Of course, if you've ever been on a trip like that, there's so much processing that goes on. But as we processed and as time went on, we just felt really called to education. And we had met an interpreter while we were there who really had a passion for education. He had been a street kid in Haiti who was, no family, just hanging out on the streets, living day to day. And someone had paid, the $300 a year or whatever to educate him. And he had learned English, and that had changed his entire life. So he was like, let's start a school. Let's start a school. Let's start a school. And we're like, well, I don't know how to start a school. I mean, I don't know anything about it. Exactly. I'm clueless as to how to start a school. But it took about a year of discussing that. And the interpreter had moved to a different area in Haiti called Jacmel, which is a 4-hour drive from the capital city of Port-au-Prince, through the mountains, just a very rugged, interesting trip. But we visited him the next year, and it's a beautiful area because it's right along the ocean. And when you walk up the hill by where we settled, you can actually see the ocean. But at that time, we met a little old lady named Madame Pole who had a church, a little church building. And by church, I mean it is a little brick building, one room, no windows, one door, no electricity or anything. And Madame Pole had prayed a long time ago that if God ever provided her with property, she would allow and dedicate some of that land to him. So that was why she had this little one room church in her place. So she said, if you guys want to start a school, I will let you use the building free of charge to start your kids. So January of 2012, we took 30 kids from the community that had never been to school. And some of these kids were 12, 13, 14 years old. And we brought them into this one room church.
Wow. And what was that experience like for you? So we can jump back to some of maybe the details, right? Between 2010 when you first were there and then when the school opened. But standing there, that first class that you have these kids, you've been given this dream and this vision from the Lord. Can you explain that? Like, what was that feeling for you guys of standing, or were you teaching? Like, were you the ones teaching? Had you equipped, Haitians to do the teaching, or just seeing that dream come to fruition, right?
One of our visions, that I don't know why, but we felt compelled at the beginning to make the school Haitian run. In other words, we would raise the funding, we would oversee things, but we really felt that it was important to grow up Haitian leaders, Haitian teachers, and maybe even do things in a Haitian manner rather than a Western manner. And I'm not sure where that vision came from. I guess we would have to say it came from God. And as Bob referred to before, there have been so many instances in our life where we took in homeless people, or we took in pregnant, women and refugees off of a plane from a third world country, that we had done enough where we took that step out and just said, okay, this is what we feel like God's calling us to do, and just taking it one day at a time. And I think the biggest thing was feeling overwhelmed, like, I don't know what we're doing, Here we are. I mean, we are living at home and trying to run this school and maybe able to make trips there 3 or 4 times a year, but I think the initial reaction was the financial pressure of how to deal with that, because even if it's only 30 kids, we've still got to pay teacher salaries, we've still got to pay. And another thing that we had decided from the very beginning was that we would feed these children, because many of them don't get any meals at all. And I think, what's the Haitian proverb? Something, an empty bag cannot stand. And the basic thought is, if you've got a child who's starving, they can't learn.
Sure.
So that was one of the financial pressures, though, was that we were going to feed these children every day. So here we are, 30 kids, teacher salaries, books, all of these things. It's like, okay, how do we raise, the money, and how do we raise the finances? So I think the initial feeling was just, wow, overwhelmed. How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I distinctly remember after we agreed to do this, and there was 4 of us originally. There was another couple that were kind of co-founders. When we originally did this, I distinctly remember laying in our bed one night and having whatever my version of a panic attack is. I don't really get super nervous, but I had this sense of, what have I gotten us into? And it was almost a feeling of some desperation, because I was going through the list of things I didn't know how to do.
Sure.
I don't speak the language. I don't hold the currency. I don't know how to acquire land. I can't read the textbook. And in that same breath, it was almost as if this exasperated prayer went up, and it came back with laughter, saying, you, whatever made you think this was about you? And it was this somewhat peaceful sense that the Lord was saying, this has never been about you. These Haitian kids will get taken care of one way or another. I'm inviting you to join me in what I'm about to do. And that gave me a sense of relief, because I am a control freak. That gave me a sense of peace. There was still going to be a ton of work. There's no question about that. But eternal destiny of all these Haitian kids and whether or not they got to eat or not wasn't in my hands anymore, where I had mistakenly put it. So that was kind of a liberating feeling that we got permission from the Lord to proceed. And we did. The irony of it, however, was we felt, the two founding couples felt like we could swing it ourselves. We could educate these 30 kids ourselves, and we budgeted out of each of our own personal incomes. This is all it would take, and we can do this. This is what our monthly exposure will be. And no sooner did we do that than my company went through a significant downturn, and I lost my job.
Wow.
And so then it became, you're going to learn one way or another what walking by faith really looks like.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to take that away from you. You're not going to get credit for this.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. And it's not saying that God did that to you, like made your financial problems, but it's amazing how when you step out in faith, that's usually what happens. The Lord's like, okay, well,
whatever gifting you
this
thought
now.
you had, I don't need that. I just need obedience.
Yeah, that's really good. So, wow, that's amazing. I love hearing that story of you saw a need and you fulfilled it, right? Like, but you didn't do that. The Lord did that. So how did you determine which 30 kids, right? So like I've been to the Dominican Republic, so they share an island. And so I know, I mean, I didn't experience Haiti because at the time there was a lot of discourse between the two countries and hatred and things like that.
Is.
And yeah, but I also know that like being on the same island, there's obviously third world countries and things like that. So how did you determine those kids? Because they all need education. They all need Jesus, Well,
and frankly, their parents, for the most part, the part of the village part that we're in, most of those parents never went to any school at all. And so even getting those parents convinced that this was a good idea would have been a struggle. And I think one of the kindnesses of the Lord is that he gave us really good leader on the ground right on the very first day. He was a very young man, and he's got some significant strengths. He's also got some powerful weaknesses, but at 21, 22 years old, he was going to be kind of our captain. And he did a lot of walking through the mountains to say, we're starting this school. He got laughed at, he got scoffed at. We just kind of prayed our way, saying, Lord, you know the kids. You know who needs to be here. And you'll open that door for them. And, with time, they'll smell the rice and beans cooking, and more curious seekers will stick their noses in and see what's going on. And it really wasn't very long before we were kind of bursting at the seams, but it took a long time. He got derisively mocked as nothing more than a caterpillar.
Wow.
And just a couple years ago, I heard some parents sort of almost in a joyful, repentant way calling him a butterfly, because he's past caterpillar now. He's graduated. But yeah, he did a lot of the foot traffic. And I think collectively we all did a lot of the knee traffic, just praying, just saying, Lord, this is on you. You said you were going to do some work. We're gonna watch and see who you bring in.
What was the journey like personally for you guys? So like in your own walk with Jesus, you were in 2010, you said, Kay, that was the first time you went down. When was the first time you went down, Bob?
I went down right as we opened it up. So as soon as it was open, I went down on a scouting trip to make sure it was for real. So that would have been like January 2012.
Yeah. Okay. So you've experienced this culture now for the first time. And like I said, I know I've been on a few different missions trips, but there's that moment, I think, where you have to sit back and try and rectify, like, I'm in this Western first world country. How is what I'm seeing okay? Right? What was that process like for you guys?
I think you described it. That's exactly. And every time we go down, you have to make that reconciliation again, because how is a loving, perfect, God that we believe is good, and then you go down and see, and I mean, there's a lot of heart in Haiti. I think the thing that struck us over the years is that it's like you've got so much beauty juxtaposed with so much hard. In America, we kind of separate the two. You know, we got the nice places, and in Haiti, it is just right on top of each other. And as a nurse, I see the inadequate health care. We have students, we have parents dying of diseases that should not, they're totally treatable. Wow. As a matter of fact, just less than a month ago, we have a teacher, Edward, who's been with us from the very get-go, just an incredible young man who married recently and finished up his house. His house was damaged in the earthquake, and finally, after I think 8 years, got the house all finished up for his new wife. And she was pregnant and had some complications, and she died. I mean, something we would go to the hospital for and be treated, and yeah, it would be scary, but she's you know, her and her baby are gone now. And those are the hard things to deal with. And then you have to go home and say, so why am I here? Why am I living, you know, in this land with so much opportunity and so much, you know, availability of resources, and then to go down there? And I think one of the things for me to help grapple with it was Bob's strategy, because when you go down to a place like that, it's so easy to get pulled in a million directions because the needs are just overwhelming. I mean, there have been times when, I mean, I have to walk away from people, mamas that are like, I'm hungry, and they've got this baby, and that is so hard. But Bob, you know, in order, and I think this was a lesson we learned with the refugees, that in order to be effective, you really have to stay in a lane. In other words, you have to be very comfortable with what God has called you to do, very clear on that, and then stick to it. And Bob was the one, he came up with the acronym GEM, of God honoring, education, and a meal. And everything has to go through that filter. Does that fit with our, you know, our vision? Because I mean, there's just so many things that you could. And I think that's why we're still here 10 years later, because we have had to maintain that focus. And yes, there are so many needs, and so many needs that you have to kind of almost, you know, turn a blind eye to. But in order to not be burnt out, in order to, you know, have such limited, if you just throw limited resources at, you know, minor things, then you really don't make an impact. Whereas now for 10 years, we've been educating these kids. We have 150 kids now in this school. And I think we've had 4 graduating classes of 6th graders. So we just have to focus that's where our calling is. And that's, you know, where we have to stay focused.
That's really good. And I think that's applicable even to so many of us now, and like even people listening, where I know I want to do this, and this, but like you said, figuring out, okay, what is the Lord calling me to do? And I'm going to focus on that and stay in my lane and trust that you guys are doing what the Lord's calling you to do, and you guys are doing what the Lord's calling you to do. That's really helpful and applicable, even not in a third world country or on the mission field.
Well, and I think one of the things that we've been really treated to is there are other ministries. So we don't have to be a clinic. The Cubans have a very good clinic, not terribly far from our school, that when we do have a student or a teacher who's in really bad shape, we can just wire money down and get them to that clinic. But we don't have to be the clinic. We don't have to be an orphanage. We know where the orphanages are. You know, we don't have to necessarily be, you know, the roofing contractors every time a hurricane comes through, because there are other ministries. And to the degree that you can network with other people in the same area, maybe called to a different thing, maybe gifted differently, maybe given a different vision, partner up, because to try to go it alone is it's an exhausting exercise.
And that's so biblical even, right? Like as believers, we weren't called to do this life alone. We weren't called to do ministry alone. We're called to partner up with people and link arms. I mean, that's what the body of Christ is, right? Like,
Right.
Wow. So you've had 4 graduating classes, you said so far, about.
Yeah, we started in the very beginning with 1st and 2nd grade.
Okay.
And so when they aged up to 6th grade, our first graduating class was 2 girls.
Okay.
And
that's awesome.
Now we're averaging a dozen or so out of every 150 kids. About a dozen of them are 6th graders that will pass the exit exam and go on to upper school if they choose.
So does your school go into upper schools, or so it's just to 6th grade?
I think that's another one of those
Or-
areas where we found that sticking with the elementary education, because there are some very good secondary schools within the area, that what we do is a lot of times people will continue to sponsor a child so that we can put them in a secondary school who are doing it very well. In taking back to the very start and the inception of this, our goal was to get children off the streets and teach them to read. I mean, that was if we could do that, we felt like, okay, we were strong. And so as time has gone on, it's like after a couple of years, it's like, no, I just don't want to take them off the street. I want to give them a good education. So each year, it's kind of our vision. God has let our vision grow, with that. And he didn't throw it all on us at once. So, we've gone to, okay, I just want to take some kids and teach them how to read to now, you know what? I want to make these kids ready, and we do have 100% passing rate. There are some exit exams that the kids have to take in order to get into secondary school. So we do have 100% pass rate as far as that goes.
That's
so,
awesome.
So
and are those mandated by the Haitian school
state,
system and stuff? Okay.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. What was the reception like for you guys, like in the community? I know at first, people were like making fun of it, but then even in the education world of the state of Haiti or of the country, like, have you become like accepted or well known as like this good primary school, or, the kids want to come here?
It's a great question, Stacy. When it took us a couple of tries to even get a minister of education to look at our school to certify it. And when they did, and when we got our certification, we were pretty excited. That was 6 years or so ago. And then it took the principals of the secondary schools some arm twisting to take our kids, because the reputation was, you're up at that one on the hill that has no electricity, no running water, and you are the poorest of the poor, which was our target audience.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a compliment.
Yeah, well, you got us. That's exactly what we're doing. But the truth is, our students have fared very well in the secondary, especially those early grads. They did us a big favor when Angela and Christani graduated and became two of the very top 7th grade students in the school down the road. That principal began linking arms with ours and saying, "What are you doing up here that's working?"